I started the recording, just so you know.
All right. Very well. I will kill my video. And start. Okay, welcome everyone. And those of you who are just joining, I'm going to try to start on time so as not to encroach on the next speaker. Oh, wait a minute, that's me. So I guess it doesn't matter. I sort of have back-to-back topics here, which may sort of bleed into each other, but I will do my best to have a delineation between them, because some folks may only be coming for the second one. So we're going to be talking about field maps. So field maps being our primary field data collection and viewing and tracking application. Talk about that merging of the apps. I also mentioned that this session is sponsored by Bad Elf, who makes GNSS receivers, which pair quite nicely with devices that work with field maps. So it's kind of a nice thing. And I may actually show you this if I have time and my device stops acting up and wants to connect to the receiver. So let's get that going. Okay, so field apps. Before we had apps that were focused on each activity. So we had a navigator for navigating point to point and integrating with, say, ArcGIS Pro to make custom navigation maps. We had Explorer to help us look at data but not being able to edit it. That was a great tool for read-only access. We had a planning tool with Workforce, which allowed us to do assignments. And then we had Tracker, which was going to allow us to monitor locations of folks. And then we had Collector, which was allowing us to go out and do field data capture. And a lot of the feedback from users was, why do we have so many apps? It seems like they're all trying to do a similar task. So the team looked at that, and there were several things that came into play with that concept. And the result was the ArcGIS field maps. I won't say the Field Maps app because we have two components. There's a Field Maps web application that you use to configure your field maps, and then there's the Field Maps mobile where you actually use it. We put more features and functions into Field Maps. It now contains the same viewing and sketching that you could do with Explorer. It contains the tracking components that you had with Tracker. Soon, it will contain navigation and workforce assignment tasks as well. So we've sort of put all of this together into this field maps application and web app. Okay, so this is now become the foundational app for the mobile workforce. It runs on the iOS and Android. There is not field maps for Windows 10, unlike with Survey 123 and Quick Capture, which are built on the App Studio platform, which is platform agnostic. Field maps, like say Collector and Explorer, etc., have this. The team decided that they were going to build this strictly on iOS and Android, and they say that's due to a lack of users on the Windows platform. So if you have a Windows 10 device that you want to take out in the field, then I would suggest that you communicate that to us so we can get that information back to the team to say, you know, we do have customers that are using, that want to use field maps out on, say, Surface devices. I've seen some of the new Surface devices on Windows 11. They're pretty nice. So let us know. Okay, so with field maps, you can go out and do asset inspection or creation. You can collect the data. You can do it in a high accuracy mode by pairing with a receiver. You can work with maps even offline, which is great. You can mark them up and then share the markup and find out where you're going, where you've been. Uses the best of breed mapping system that we've built, combining that with the data collection solution we had with Collector, and then Tracker. So those are the pieces that are in there, and then coming up soon will be working in Workforce and Navigator. So there's one app to deploy and learn. You don't have to learn like 3 or 4 different apps to get all the work done. You sign into ArcGIS only once. That was another comment was, I've got these 3 or 4 apps and some of them are logged into the right org and some aren't. So that was a desire again of why they wanted to put all this stuff together. It's also a smaller footprint. So like field maps, as this single app is smaller than the other apps would have been combined. You're only updating one app at a time and it's consistent. So that's pretty important. Some of the key capabilities, the ability to view the map at any time. So that's the Explorer type capability. So I can look at the maps, I can change my base map, it's updated in real time. I can do a search by a feature or an address. So all of that stuff, I can sketch the map up with a freehand sketch and marker placement. And then you can share that like either device to device, email, or through the organization, you can share the markup. So those are all Explorer type capabilities. I would want to mention that we're going to have increasing support for indoor maps. So floor plans, multi-floor indoor maps, as we've talked about with indoor mapping. We didn't have any sessions on that at NEARC this year, but stay tuned because we probably will have some in the spring. High accuracy data collection with external GNSS receivers. That's a big deal. If you want to get better than the default accuracy that your phone gives you, which isn't great, it's probably like something around 30 feet, so like 10 meters. You can get a lot better than that with an external receiver. The smart form editing, which I'm going to talk about in the next session more, which simplifies the creation of a form. It sort of takes the whole building the form away from where before we sort of depended on the maps pop-up. However the pop-up was defined how the data would look in the form. Now we've sort of separated that. So you can, if you want, just inherit your form from the pop-up. You can just say, hey, replicate the pop-up in my form, boom, and you're done. But you can do a lot of other things that we're going to talk about. Viewing, recording, and sharing the location tracks. Like I said, that's all built in now. Instead of having the Tracker app, you have to have a Tracker license, but the app actually is now field maps. It also supports Apple Watch, which is kind of interesting, where you can like have it on your watch, just reach down, say start tracking, and then reach down, tap to watch, and go end tracking. So that's also pretty interesting. So let's talk about these in a little more detail. So the mobile application, this symbology, and now the app will respect arcade expressions. So if you build arcade expressions for labeling in symbology, that's going to be respected in the app. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's all based on working with a different version of the API. Group layers are supported as well as annotation. Pop-ups, again, supporting arcade. So the arcade pop-up profile would be respected. And so other things like map tools, things like the GPS, so you can see the compass, base maps, bookmarks, layers, and legends, which you've all had before. Measuring is improved. That's better. The ability to share the map right from the app. So if that user that is got field maps open has permissions, they could actually in the field decide to share that map with someone else. So that's pretty cool. Synchronizing map changes when you're offline, the ability to do that. And then getting directions, not just from our Navigator app, but if you want to from Google Maps or Apple Maps, right? So the ability to just say, look, I'm just going to use the street data that I've got from Google Maps or Apple Maps. That's you can use that now. You could do it before. You had to play some games with it, but now you can just do it. So talking about the markup. So if you've used Explorer before with markup, you know what I'm talking about. Just freehand sketching of lines and areas, adding in the text, turning the markup layers on and off. That's pretty easy. And then sharing the markup is also pretty simple. It could be done. You could actually like say, I want to take all of the markup from this particular map and I want to package it up and send it as a text message. to another field maps user, and then they could import it. So that's quite useful to be able to do that. The field maps mobile having support for high accuracy data collection. I talked about this in the quick capture session. A lot of applications need a lot better accuracy than you get out of the box. So getting out of the box, like I said, you're probably going to get something around 30 feet. I mean, you could get better than that. You just can't really predict it. The GPS chips in phones are not super sophisticated. That could change in the future. I don't really know. But you can get much better using an external GNSS receiver. You can, a lot of them, you can get like a one meter accuracy for pretty reasonable cost. The example that I have is the Bad Elf Surveyor, which you would want to probably contact them for pricing. But I think the Surveyor is like $600, something like that, and you get 1 meter, which is pretty good, I think, bang for the buck. But I've also seen applications where you can get centimeter accuracy, say from pairing it with a Trimble device or the Trimble Catalyst system. So there's all sorts of other solutions where you can get wide and varying ranges of accuracy to improve what you get out of the box. Okay. We can also grab the information from the receiver to get like, how many satellites did I have? What was the correction used? Any averaging, use point averaging to say like, over time, give me like the 5 points and just average all of those out. Stream location back if you wanted to do that too. So there's all sorts of things you can do with that, and you end up saving it as like a location profile, and you store that on the device. That way you can just connect to it whenever you want to. Okay, transaction model support now. So we support, so if you were on an enterprise setup, ArcGIS Enterprise, you had a version geodatabase, we now support editing non-version geodatabases or traditional versioning, or if you've got 10.8.1 or higher, offline branch versioning. So branch versioning is a different / new versioning type. If you do work with utility network or with parcel fabric, you may be familiar with branch versioning and how it's a sort of a flatter, simpler versioning model, much more efficient, and it's a lot more friendly with working with mobile access, so remote access. So branch versioning totally supported. Also supporting feature inspections. So you can say, or like one-to-many relationships. I've got like a hydrant and I've got a flushing table. So I've got like 17 flushing records for a specific hydrant. And then I've got inspection records that I might want to put in there as well. So you can see that in a little animation. So that that all works out great. The interface has been cleaned up. I think it's a lot better. It's a lot more intuitive, especially on a phone. The phone format, they did a lot of work on that. It looks a lot better. Smart forms are supported on both layers and tables, so that's pretty cool. So setting up group fields and conditional visibility and pick lists, and creating lists is always a great thing in the field, because the less typing you've got to do out there, the better. So to be able to, the ability to have values more in drop-down lists. Slight licensing change. The tracker add-on license is included with the field worker user type. So you don't have to buy a tracker license if you've got a field worker. So that's all in there. Tracker still has all of the feature functions it's got, especially like the battery saving. It does a really good job with that. It's really quite impressive. The battery consumption with tracker it works pretty good. I mean, I don't think we have like a white paper on that, on some of the testing that they've done. The ability to switch tracker on and off for just in a map or for all maps, that's pretty easy to do. Like I said, it integrates with Apple Watch, so you can see the little graphic there on the right. You can just whack the button on your watch. It also shows up in the app to say like, track me for the next 4 hours, or turn tracking off, or whatever. And then you use the track viewer in ArcGIS Online to view and share the tracks. Indoor mapping, I mentioned, this is something that we're working on right now. The ability to have the indoors information model either in a web map or an offline map package. And this is to have floor aware maps on a device. So this is pretty interesting. This is all part of our GeoBIM integrations that we're doing, work that we're doing with Autodesk on bringing in Revit models and being able to look at a facility on a floor by floor basis, see it in 3D, work on it on a specific floor, be able to like change floors. You can see on the phone over here to the right, there's 3 floors in this facility. So you could like just go in and select which floor you're working on. So that's going to also include editable feature layers. So you could be going in and like walking down a corridor and saying, okay, I'm going to take a picture of this defibrillation station because it doesn't look great. It's looking like the glass is cracked. So somebody's got to come fix that. So, picking that up and, walking around inside of a building is kind of like walking around town. It just happens to be a different way of structuring it. Remote control of field apps with app links. So if other applications can control field maps and start up field maps in specific ways. We've got a lot of stuff on out on GeoNet and in some of the help and in the docs on how to set this up, where you've got automatic, bring the map up at a certain location, at a certain scale, immediately start data collection. There's all sorts of things you can do with these app links. That's pretty powerful. My phone is freaking out. Please stop that. Let's see, go back here. Some other things that are iOS specific. I mean, we've talked about the Apple Watch integration, support with dark mode, split view on an iPad, which is pretty neat. And a couple other things. Not quite sure, like some of these features, what the plan is for having those on Android. It's different with Android because we have different flavors of Android for different phones. So that's always a challenge for the dev team. There's all sorts of other stuff I could talk about here, like mobile device management. I don't really know a lot about this, but this is like a technique that IT departments use for managing devices across their organizations, and we do support integrating with that. So it's sort of like how we integrate with like named directory systems like Active Directory or SAML. This is a EMM managed access thing. We also can integrate with that. So that is pretty cool. So let's quickly jump over to some demo. If I could get my phone to connect. It has decided to stop connecting. So please hold. Connect, please. There we go. Okay, so I'm screencasting my phone over here to my air server, so I can show you field maps here in action. So I go over here to my Esri folder and I pull up field maps, and you can see that I've got a bunch of different field maps here, so you can get an idea of what the user interface looks like. So if I come over here and I just open up, like, for example, this Ontario traffic signals. So this is a set of traffic signals here for the city of Ontario. They're symbolized based on the light type, and whether it's hanging from above or it's on a post. So stuff like that. You can see if I go ahead and click on one of those, just like you might see with Collector, you get a view of all the data. You can say, do I have anything attached? Oh yeah, there's a photo. What's that? It's 2 cats eating dinner. So that's not really a traffic light, but I didn't have a traffic light to take a picture of. So you can see it was edited by me. It tells me how long I was online. Emergency vehicle preemption and railroad preemption. That's does this traffic light get turned off automatically if like a fire truck or EMT is going by? So these were read-only fields. These are fields that I've set up so that I can see it, but I couldn't actually edit it. Okay, so I can go in and look at these and say, for example, what's the asset condition? It's very good. Action taken was an installation. And so like maybe I'm going to change this. You can see I have a pick list for this, so this is good. So we went and did an inspection, but it's perfectly fine. I don't need to come back. And as you can see, when I clicked on no, those other fields went away. So if I change that to yes, it's going to ask me, who's required to come back and why. So that's part of smart forms. So I'm going to talk about that in the next session. But just like you would do in the other apps, you would just say, I'm going to submit that. If this was an offline map, so for example, here's my Ontario hydrants. So this is 3 maps that I set up for offline use. And so the experience the user gets here in the app is they see the chunk that has been downloaded to the phone. So not all of the features and not all of the base map has been put on the phone on this device. It's only the ones that I created in this offline area. Okay, so that's all pretty cool. So very handy. And let's put this away and come back and talk about how that stuff gets set up. So that all gets set up in the Field Maps app. Okay, so in this web app, we go in and we work on that here. So we configure things like the smart form experience in the offline areas. We set up all the different tools that we might want to use, decide, what kind of GPS averaging we want to use for that. Some of the other things you can set up are like, what order do I want the fields to come in? Do I want them to be, one to show up before another? Do I want to use a feature template? So I create a feature template in Pro and I publish that. I can use that there, or I can create my own over here. And there's a lot better ways to edit these things with smart forms and set that up. I'm going to talk about that in the next section, but I did want to put a slide in here for that. To be able to do things like group fields together and then set the visibility of a group, kind of like what you would do with Survey 123. It's very similar. So I usually refer to it as smart forms with the small s and small f, as opposed to capital S and capital F, which I always think of in terms of Survey 123, even though here on this screen I've got it with the other S and F, but trying to come up with a way to delineate those. And then the offline areas are also managed inside that app. And the best way to show that is to just pull it up over here. So I go over here to my city application, and I can see that I've got, for example, I've got all my data over here. And for some reason I got logged out. Well, that's interesting. Okay, let's fix that. Sign back in. Perfect timing. It's the demo effect. Okay, let's go to my content. And I can see over here where I've got a whole bunch of these apps, and I've got some data for Cambridge. I've got data in here for Ontario. I've got all these different pieces and parts in here. But I've also got in my app picker over here, I've got field maps. So when I open up the Field Maps app, what it's gonna do is it's gonna look for all the maps that I've got that are candidates for field data collection. And I don't have to open these up in Field Maps to get it to work on the phone, but this is where I would like go in and start, editing and changing things, as I wanted to set them up and work on them. Okay, so for example, here's my Cambridge hydrants for NEARC. You can see here I've got offline is disabled in this particular map. I can set up things like the GPS averaging, what size photos do I want to allow, what sort of sharing do I want to use? So I could share that through a QR code if I wanted to. I can look at the content, and I can see how I've built a form over here just by importing a pop-up. So I could go in here and start editing and managing this to look at that and say this ancillary mode. Right now that's not showing. Do I want to put that in here? That's no, I don't think so. The field guys don't need to see those fields. They only need to see these fields over here that have to do with field data capture. So that's pretty good. I've got a template set up, so a gate hydrant and non-gate hydrants show up differently as far as the colors go, and that's coming off a subtype, so it inherited that just automatically. Let me come back over here and grab this. Kind of gonna be creeping into my own time here a little bit, but that's okay. I'll forgive myself. Okay, so here's the one for Ontario hydrant field map, and you'll see that if I click the offline button, that I've got 3 offline areas defined. So this is how you manage this. So you can set this up to say, you know, I'm going to define a specific map area. So I've got like a southwest area, a south central area, a northeast area. And these are the ones that I've delineated. And on the device, I can decide whether or not I want to download that to the phone or not. So I don't know if you saw that when I had the actual Field Maps app up or not, but you can see that the northeast tile has been downloaded with all the data, and then the other 2 have not. So that's how I can tell whether or not they've been downloaded. So it's pretty easy for me to like just outline this. I can just draw an area. It doesn't have to be any specific size and say, okay, that this is the downloadable area I want, or I could take the whole thing. Quite frankly, in this case, it's not a whole lot of data, so it wouldn't be a big lift to have that completely be offline. Okay, so we'll close that. I'm sort of running up against it on time here, so very quickly, like I said, a field worker is the license that you have to have field maps, and this is available in online and enterprise. It all depends on what kind of user you have, what you can do. So if you're viewer only, you essentially have like Explorer type ability. But if you have a viewer user type and a tracker license, that user can actually use tracker. They don't have to be a field map user. So you could track somebody's location without them having to have a field user license type. Okay. New things that are coming, the smart forms continue to be improved, data collection improved, where you can collect like multiple features or delete multiple features through like an area if you want to go and delete those. Support for the utility network, they're working on that right now. So this is going to be a big deal for those folks that are in that space. Working on improving, this is stuff that came out in June with the arcade expressions, being able to set those up. So that's continuing to be improved. Coming up, map authoring and creating content to be able to go and create layers to do field editing and right inside the Field Maps app. More with smart forms, more with workforce, so integrating the workforce capabilities right into Field Maps. Linear referencing, that's kind of a big one people have been asking for at the DOTs. Longer term, things like navigation, so incorporating navigator geotriggers. So if you drift into a certain zone, say you're designated for collecting data in a certain geographic zone, you move out of it, it would like give you a warning or say, hey, you know, you can't collect stuff over here because that's where your buddy is supposed to be collecting data. So that's something that's coming in up more in the long term. So I've gonna be kind of running up against it. Sorry about that. I ran a little long on this one. Plug the hub, go to the Boston hub and sign up, follow. You can find out more stuff that we're doing, more events and more seminars that we're going to be running. I will provide this presentation as a PDF for field operations. I've got a bunch of links in here, especially to the blog. It's the best place to follow what's going on, but also some videos from the UC that are pretty cool that you might want to watch. And then link there about smart forms as well. There is a workshop tomorrow in a follow along format. So it's going to be really hard to do this without being there in person, but we're going to give it a shot. And I think what I'm going to do is use one of the learn lessons as the format. So then folks that want to continue to try using this can just keep using it, the learn lesson data and content. So if you're interested in that, you can come to that. We'll see how that goes.
Couple questions,
left
Mark.
what? 2 minutes. Okay.
Not even. Can you create offline map areas from Polygon feature service?
Oh.
We can check on that.
I don't know. There's a sketch tool to sketch the area, but yeah, like say you wanted to auto-generate offline areas based on a Polygon map service. I have not even thought of doing that.
That's fine. So that's Jason asked that. We'll answer that.
Yeah,
He wrote it in
that.
Hoover and we'll get an answer for
Yeah,
you.
good. I
Put it in
like
the
it.
Hoover chat. Do you need an indoor subscription to display the data by floor like you did in the demo, or was that just pulling from a web map with the data structured in a way to be floor aware?
I don't think it needs to have an indoor license.
Agree.
Do not
I
think
agree.
so. I think that's just that the app has been designed to be floor aware. So if it sees an indoor data set, it would just recognize that and let you switch floors.
Right. I think those are the only questions. I will just mention that I put in the Hoover thing a little script that was written because web maps generally just show up in field maps, and you may not want all the web maps that you have access to or your organization shares to be in field maps. So you can actually toggle. There's a toggle to do that in the field maps web app, but there's a script I referenced in the Hoover thing to do it in bulk. Just so you know, right? So you could do a search for, something, some word, keyword tag, whatever it is, and you could disable that in bulk for, assuming you're an administrator, across your org. So
Right.
I think those are the only questions that I see. Krithka, am I missing any?
Yeah, in the sharing tab in the app,
Right.
that's where you can say I want to hide that
Yep.
particular map in Field Maps Mobile. But apparently, so Tom's got a reference to some scripting that would let you bulk shut down a bunch of them.
Yeah, there've been some requests to make that an option. Like by default, don't share them, and I'll turn on the ones I want. But right now, it's not that way. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. I will now turn over to the next speaker, which is me. So change presentations. Here we go. Okay, I'm back, even though I never left. I actually didn't get to showing the pairing with the GNSS receiver. It's possible I could show it here, but if not, I'll try to include that in the workshop too. And I have some links to that in the section that I added at the end with the links. I'm pretty sure that I added a link in there on using an external GNSS receiver with field maps. So that's that's something I will try to show anyway. So this is the second part of the field maps section. So we're going to talk a little bit more about smart forms because I sort of glossed over it, even though I showed how it worked in the first presentation. So if you didn't come to the first one, that's fine. You probably did that because you're already working with field maps and you're just interested in what these smart forms are all about. So I'll try to show a little bit more of that. So what it is and what it does. So one of the things I would say about smart forms is that the smart forms concept, like the idea of smart forms, like small s, small f, is kind of like the smart form as a thing, like in Survey 123, is like Portal as a thing in enterprise. I mean, this Portal technology and the concept of a portal. So ArcGIS Online is a portal, but it's not Portal, ArcGIS Enterprise portal. It's just this entry point, and the API looks at portals kind of agnostically. So when I talk about smart forms, I mean, it's really the idea of a form that can be configured to respond to user input and can be organized and grouped in such a way as to make it extremely useful and a lot more powerful on the end user product and the end user experience. So that concept of a smart form manifests itself in Survey 123 in one way with that very form-centric approach. And then it manifests itself in field maps with field map smart forms in a different way. It's a different development platform, but they share a lot in common in the goals, what they're trying to do. Okay, so we're going to see that here when we set this all up. And it's better to just talk about it. Okay, so field maps, we talked about field maps in general in the last session, where we're talking about this whole one app to rule them all, with planning, coordinating, navigating, understanding, capturing, monitoring, all of those applications that used to be like Explorer and Collector and Tracker. All of those capabilities now are wrapped under this one app called Field Maps. Okay, so we configure smart forms inside of the Field Maps web app. So that's where it's done. So in addition to configuring and deploying the map, the map properties, what layers do we want to use, what tables do we want to have in there, what does the offline experience look like, what are my areas that I can take offline, what are the ones that I want to have, how do I want to share and deploy these maps. All of those things are done in this application. It uses ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise 10.8.1 or higher. There was a question I had last week when I was presenting at the Southern Tier folks, and I think it came over through the chat. They're asking about, field maps being supported with Enterprise 10.7x, and there was some possibility of some of it might work and some of it didn't. I hadn't really finished investigating that or not. But on the safe side, it's 10.8.1 or higher. So the current version of Enterprise is really what you need, because Field Maps comes bundled in it and with it. And I don't have to tell you this. Don't use Internet Explorer 11. Just don't use Internet Explorer. Period. Is sort of like a better way to go there. Okay, so the smart form experience, it's included in the web map, and it's included in the web map specification. So what does that mean? The web map specification is the documented JSON that makes up the contents of a web map. So you can put smart form things inside of a web map now, and it just gets carried. It gets carried in there. So it's part of the map, and it's completely supported in the map viewer. Right. So it helps us to simplify the field editing experience. You design these things right in the Field Maps app. Groups are really useful. So if you've got, and any of you who've done a lot of field data collection have probably run into this, where you've got a field map, a form that has multiple lines. It just goes on forever. You feel like you're scrolling to the bottom constantly because there's so much stuff in there. So being able to control when the fields appear and when they don't, being able to put them into logical groups where I could then collapse the group and look at it. It's kind of like in Windows Explorer when you collapse like the directory tree. You don't necessarily want to see every single directory completely expanded. That would be kind of messy. So this ability to open and close groups so you can see those. Applying conditional visibility to fields, which is good to say, if I answer a certain question with a certain answer, I want it to then prompt me for some more information. Okay. And then also at the same time, you want to be able to qualify required and read-only fields. You might want to have fields in here that for this particular map, I only want the information to be there just so the field guys know what it is. I don't want them to be able to edit it. I just want them to be able to see it. Okay, so that's good that you can just set that up as that one field map. You can do that in. Okay, so the smart forms, like I said, grouping. Here's some good examples of that. So you can see, I say I've got this inspector information. It's all going to be in this group, and then I can decide to collapse or expand the group. And so when I collapse the group, the description shows up so that I can see, hey, pick your assigned unit, enter the name, date, and add the structural details. And that, helps me decide on whether or not this is something I need to fill out. So it's important to have like a meaningful name and description on each group, just call it like group 1 and blah, even though I think group 1 is like the default group name. And then that does, you will inherit stuff when you convert from a pop-up. So like if the pop-up had a title, it'll automatically create a group with that title. Okay, so that's that just gives you a start. Applying the conditional visibility. This is something that you're going to do right here in the web app, and you're going to use Arcade to do it. All right, so you got to know a little bit of Arcade here to get this to work, but it's really easy. So don't be scared on this. It's definitely nothing to freak out about. It's just a little bit of syntax with Arcade to control the field visibility, and it can be applied to a field or to a group. So you can have like a group that would have maybe 12 questions, but those 12 questions would never have to be asked unless a certain variable was set. So for example, I could say whenever the user clicks and says that there is structural damage to a building when they're doing a building inspection, then they click on that and the Arcade script would evaluate that, and they'd say, oh, well, if it's equivalent to a certain value, then I want you to prompt the user to fill out all this information about the damage to the structure. Otherwise, don't bother. Don't bother them with these 14 questions because this building, the structure is not damaged and there's no point in showing all that information. Okay, so it's just a little bit of Arcade to do this. You'll see in my what's coming next slide that one thing they want to do, the team does, is they want to have like an expression builder. Okay, so like in field maps, they have like an expression builder, kind of like what you have in Pro. Where you build an expression using SQL-like buttons and commands to construct this expression, and then be able to, you wouldn't have to like be typing any code in or anything like that. Okay, so that's on the way. And another thing, I think I also have this on another slide, is to be able to save the expressions. So like, saving these expressions and stashing them somewhere so you can use them over and over again. Okay, read-only fields, like I mentioned, they're visible in the form but not editable. So this is pretty good. The field folks may want to know like who the manufacturer of a hydrant is, because that lets them know things like what tools I have to bring with me out in the field, or maybe a certain manual we need to have. But we don't want them to change it. We don't want them to even like accidentally click on the manufacturer, which would have a domain underneath it. I mean, that's probably stuff that's going to be said in the field. Although I had a conversation last week along the lines of, well, if I'm in the field installing a new hydrant, then I want to be able to set that up to edit the manufacturer. And it's like, yeah, you could do that, and you could like set that up to say, if action is installation, then we're gonna prompt for the manufacturer of the hydrant, or a better way to do that might be to have a template. So when I do the editing and I add this new hydrant onto the map, it's gonna add. You're going to select the manufacturer. So there's a lot of ways to do that. Okay, required fields say, hey, before I can submit the edits, I must have, say, the flow rate on this hydrant. That has to be filled out. Okay, I cannot just keep going without filling that in. There may be certain fields that you absolutely want to have put in. Okay, description. Again, it's always good to have these in here. It helps guide the form entry. So to have information in there to help sort of lead the user along. Obviously, it's an experienced field crew or an experienced user. She might get annoyed with all these descriptions, but it's really going to help someone who, is new or doesn't really understand what the task at hand is. Input types, these define the constraints and the method for entry. So a text box being like a line of text, and then a text area would be like for multiple lines of text. a date versus a date time. So if I want to collect the date of, say, the inspection, great, or I want to collect the date and the time. So I'll use like the date and a date and time picker to be able to pull those in. So things like that. So that's, you know, pretty typical form building type of data entry. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into and see what some of these look like. So let me get back over here. And let me get up to here. And oops. Come on. Okay, so before we show, I will show building one of these. I'm going to show this again. So I showed this in the last session, so you might be seeing this the second time.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
if you maximize that window, will it give a bigger view? There we go. Thank you.
Sorry. Whoops, that's somebody telling me about golf. So we don't want that. So if I just click on one of these and I go in and say, I want to edit it. So edit, you can see where if I say return needed, yes, it opens up another part of the form. Okay, so that's something that we can configure over here. In field maps. So let's go over here to field maps and we look at this Cambridge hydrants. Whoa, that's no longer available. It's not true. Oh, it's because I got logged out. That's what happened there. Make sure I'm still logged in. Put up field maps. Go. Okay, so here's this Cambridge hydrants for NEARC. So this is using some hydrant data I've downloaded from the Cambridge Open Data site. So go look at the content and we see this form that I've created. So I've got this in here. So all the form elements. So for example, if I wanted to, I could put a group in here and start putting these together. You can see like I've got like the last editor and the last edit date. And I could say, you know what? Those are things I don't need in this particular form. All I want to have in here is the information for the folks that are out in the field actually collecting this information. Okay, so I don't, they know they're in Cambridge, so I'm going to put like hydrant inspection. Change that name. Okay, so I've got the inspection date. You can see that's a date and a time that I've got in there. So that's going to ask me that, you know, do I want to use the date and time or do I want to just use the date? You know, maybe I'm like, we don't really care what time it was. We're just going to go with the date, you know, or if I want to have that in there. The inspection crew, that's great. That's a combo box. Why is that a combo box? Because there's a domain that sits behind it. The crew size. So this is currently an integer. And I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to make this required. Whoops, actually, it's already set to be required, not to be required in the database. I'm going to leave that there. Obviously going to allow editing in that. It's got a domain that's set on it. The hydrant status, again, these are also coming from domains. That's why they all show up as combo boxes. So then I get down here to like this, you know, return needed. This is going to be a yes or a no. Okay, so on the reason for the return, here's one where we might go in here and say the conditional visibility. Going to add an expression. And this is going to be for return needed equals yes. spell much. Go. So return needed equals yes. Whoops, returns immutable. Oh, I know what I did wrong there. Sorry, kill that. I use the domain equals yes. Test that. Cool. Okay. So we'll put that in there, and the same thing with the urgency. We could say let's go ahead and add an expression. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just use that same expression I just used. And the notes on the return, same thing. So we'll save that. So that form has successfully been saved. Come back here to my map. Let's see. Having trouble pulling this up for some reason on my phone. Hang on. All right, let's try this again. We'll go back. We'll go. Where's hydrants? Go to my bookmark. Grab one of these. Say edit it. And so you can see I've got, hydrant status is active, condition is very good, action taken, inspection, return needed, no, comments, blah, 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 go. Excellent. And here's another one. And we'll say edit that one. And we've got condition is poor. Hydrant status is active. Action taken is repairs. Return needed, yes. And it's going to come up and say, I put that other stuff in. Off we go. Let's pull this off the screen. And actually, let's go over here. Open up the web map. Let's open it up in the new map viewer. Why not? So there we go. I'm probably not going to select one that I grabbed. I should have put that on the bookmark. That was kind of dumb. So I could poke around in here and look for those, but that would be kind of silly. So we're not going to do that. So that is not working. Okay, not quite sure what's going on there. So let's go back here. Did I not save it? I didn't save it, did I? Great. Excellent. Well, that explains that. Sorry. Went through all of that and I didn't save the form. So that was pretty dumb. User error. Note to self, don't do that. So yeah, well, in that case, what I'll do here is I'll show you grouping. So I'll put all of these that would be if the return is needed, put that in there. So then for the group, I'll add the expression of, is there a return needed? Should save the form this time, that would help. Da, 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 da.
Got about 5 minutes.
Okay, return needed. Equals yes. Test. Okay. Save, that would help. Excellent. Okay, so one last try. Okay, there. Oh, I am going to run out of time. All right. Well, we'll make sure to go over this in the workshop, but I seem to have screwed that up, and by not saving it before, it's my bad. So we'll come back to here. Okay, considerations on form authoring, guidance helps. That's a big one. I didn't put any descriptions in there. You really should. Only put the fields in where you need them, and reuse expressions when appropriate. So you saw that I was reusing that. Is the return necessary expression, and just putting that across all those other fields. Like I said, what's next is conditional visibility expression builder. Field calculation is going to be in there as well. So like you could say, if I put in like the I don't know, like 2 or 3 different numeric values, I want to add those all up and put them in another one. And then respect for contingent values and attribute rules. So if you've used those in Pro at all, you know what I'm talking about. And so have those be respected, because right now they don't work across smart forms. So that's coming. Plug the hub, go to the hub, like us, and follow what we're doing. This is the same slide I had on the last presentation. So there is a smart forms link there at the bottom, and it's got some links to some videos. And I've got 3 minutes left for questions that I'm sure there were some, since I sort of stumbled there in the middle.
Well, there's just a couple questions I see. One is about if you set up a web map to use in field maps via the web app, maybe you do smart forms or whatever, I don't know. Should it not be edited in any further in, say, the web viewer or even in Collector?
Well, I mean, I'm touching it with Collector, I don't think matters. I don't think that's going to do anything. Collector is going to be dropped off the App Store at the end of the year, by the way. So that's something to be aware of. So you should shift over to field maps. And I don't.
The only thing I know,
like, if you change,
is if you open it in Classic Map Viewer, it will, you'll get a message. It'll say, hey, there's some new stuff in here I don't know what to do with, but I can open this, and it will open it, and you'll see your features, and you can even edit in that environment. But if you save the map now in the Classic Viewer after having done smart forms and whatnot, that information gets lost, because Collector doesn't, when it loads it, it doesn't read it. And so if you hit save and writes it out, it's not going to be there. So just be aware of that. You don't want to do that.
Right. Just to sort of close the loop on that other thing, sorry, I screwed that up, but so I finally saved that form. So if you say, so here it's like return needed, no, and just enter some comments. If you say return needed is yes, so now it opens up that group. You say the reason for the return is we ran out of time, and the urgency is medium, and then notes on the return or whatever you'd want it to be. So everything in that group only shows up because I went back in and set that to conditional, and I failed to reload. The sequence is you make a change in field maps, you save the form, you save the field map, but then when you go back to the device, you need to make sure to back out of the field map that you had open and reload it. Because if you don't, you won't get all the updates to it. It'd be nice if it had like that little message like Quick Capture gives you to say, hey, by the way, you've got a new version of this if you want to use
Right.
it.
Right.
Okay, I will cede my control now
Okay.
to Tom Schwartzman.
All right. Well, thanks. Any other questions that come up, put them in the Whova chat or Q&A, excuse me, for this session or in the community, and we'll try to get them answered.
Yeah,
So
put them in there. I'll take a look at them right now too while
okay.
Tom's getting going.
All right. Let me share my screen. This screen. Okay. And let me start my PowerPoint. Is that everyone seeing that? Anyone seeing that? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about Survey 123. And specifically, I'm going to talk about Survey 123 Connect. And if you don't know what that means, you will in a minute. But let's just start with the basics here. Obviously, Survey 123 is a location-aware e-form that lets you build digital workflows instead of paper workflows. And you can see in this slide that traditional forms, paper forms, are error prone. You've got to re-enter the data digitally if you want. They can be lost. You might not be able to read them. All kinds of things like that. Whereas online or digital forms, survey forms can be more intuitive and fast. They can be accessed in anywhere really, and we'll talk about that. They can collect more than just checkboxes and text. They can collect photos and of course location, and really help you automate your workforce. We think about two different types of forms. You can think about forms that are done in a browser that are online. And one example of that would be for crowdsourcing. You're getting feedback or input from the public or from a set of users, whatever it might be. And you do that with a browser often. And you can embed it in your website, do whatever, and share it with social media. And the answers, of course, can do things like drive a dashboard, like you see in this example. Another example maybe is used in the office for people to enter information that they take over the phone or something like that, and they're using a web browser to do it. And you can quickly create these kinds of surveys with Survey 123's Web Designer. We're not going to talk about Web Designer in this session. It's really about a different way of designing that's a little more powerful. I think I've already answered this, that online surveys make it easy to do. You can do it in lots of platforms, easy to share, and easy to create with the Web Designer. This is a picture of a survey someone was creating in the Web Designer, and you can see a bunch of question types on the right-hand side, and you drag and drop them onto this survey form. For instance, you see a date field, date of observation, and then farther down there's a map maybe, and other questions, and you can see all the different types of questions that you can add. And these, of course, as we move forward, they get more robust, more choices for question types. But this is a visual designer, and you drag and drop and configure things as best you can. And there's lots of different questions. And you can do some things like you can hide questions and make them conditional, like Mark had that contingent thing where, if you say yes to this question, you see 3 other questions, all that kind of stuff. You can do a lot of good stuff in a web designed form. But we're going to focus on the more robust building of forms that typically are run. Some of them can be run in a web browser, but they're more typically run with an application, the Field app, the Survey 123 Field app, and that we'll talk about in a minute, but it runs on many platforms and really can take advantage of a much more robust forms that are built using Survey 123 Connect and the XLS form specification, which we'll talk about in a minute. This is sort of the process of creating and getting answers and sharing results, but we're really focused in this session on creating, and more specifically creating a survey using that Survey 123 Connect app and not the Web Designer. Okay. Just to get this out of the way, in terms of licensing, this is true whether it's web designed or designed in Survey 123 Connect. if you have a creator license, you can pretty much do anything. Field workers can input data, submit data, look at data, et cetera, but they can't design. And then, obviously it goes backwards from there. Viewers can look, but not submit. Editors can submit web, but not field. So many of you probably have creator or field worker licenses in your organization, and maybe some of these other ones, but these are where it really shines for editing and creating and submitting data. Okay, so like I said, this session is really focused on Survey 123 Connect. And so let's get into that a little bit. Survey 123 is a desktop app, and it has versions that run on Windows, Mac, and Linux. This is the desktop app for designing and such, not the consuming app. That's just the Survey 123 Field app, and that runs on iOS and Android and Windows and Mac and Linux as well. But this is about the connect to design. And we use this thing called XLS forms. We'll talk about that in a minute. To design, we use a spreadsheet editor to do that design. It's typically Excel, but it just has to be something that can save XLS files. And this Survey 123 Connect reads that XLS file with its form description and turns it into a visual form that can be used. There's a ton of samples that we're gonna look at a bunch of them, but there's tons that come with to help you, and there's lots of blogs and help and such that are available as well. And I've put a reference to resources in the Whova Q&A window for this session. And you can also link to online maps, map packages, CSVs, etc., to use in your survey when you use Survey 123 Connect as opposed to a web thing, a web-based design form. Now, XLS form is a standard, not our standard, not an Esri standard, but it's a standard that was created to help simplify the authoring of forms in Excel or in a spreadsheet. And we are not the only people to use XLS form specification. We are just one. And you can go to that xlsform.org and read all about it and learn more about it, et cetera. We don't expose every feature that are implemented that are XLS form in XLS form, but many or most are there. We do extend things which with features that are not implemented, but that are focused on spatial, et cetera. And your best reference besides the XLS form, which is maybe too complete, is to use the Survey 123 help. It has lots and lots of information about how we've implemented that XLS form specification. What does it look like? Well, it looks something like this. This is Excel. And this does not, it's not like a web thing where you get like a WYSIWYG. What does this mean? But it's a specification that tells us how the form will be rendered. And you can see, we'll go through this, but there's some tabs across the bottom, and there's in this survey, this is the description of the survey. I have some slides on what all these mean, but you can get a sense here of the first three columns are the most important columns for a survey. What is the type, the field type really, right? When you design a database, you say, well, this is text, and this is a shape or point, and this is a date, and this is a number, and this is other things like that. So there's a type, there's a name, that's basically a field name for the database, and then there's a label of how it's represented on the survey, and then a bunch of other things that we'll talk about: appearance, default values, etc. So Survey 123 Connect, its job is to take this XLS form and turn it into that visual form that you see here. Okay, and it is a previewer. These two work together. You make edits here in Excel, and when you save them, those edits will show up here in Survey 123 Connect, and we'll see that in a few minutes. As I mentioned, the survey worksheet has three mandatory columns: type, name, and label. We just talked about those. Type of question, field name, label, and other optional columns that tell it how to appear, any default values, whether something should be calculated to store in here. There's lots of other things that we'll see. And again, here's another picture of that with just the simple, first three filled out, the most important and necessary things that need to be filled out. There's the ability also, and we'll talk more about choices, but to let people choose, right? You want a radio button, or you want people to be able to check 3 boxes for a question. What toppings do you like on your pizza? I like mushrooms and green peppers or whatever. So we can define a list. Here you have, see my sky color list. And that list has a name. It has a value that's stored in the database, and it has a label that's shown on the survey. And we'll see how we use those. There's some other fields that you can add to your list, like image and audio, filtering categories. We'll see these, multiple languages if you want. And then there's I don't think I have a picture for this, but there's another tab called settings, which tells us the URL of things, what language to use, some other styles and title and things like that. So let's get through. I want to get through these slides so we can get to the show you stuff. Obviously, there's question types. You can see this is a multiple choice question. This is a multiple choice question. These radio buttons would be single choice. There's integer fields, there's text fields, and then appearance controls how they look, and you can see some values for appearance. You can see a bunch of different types of questions: text, integer, decimal, real number, date, time, separate and together. Select one, select multiple, and then images, where you can capture a picture or maybe a signature with a finger or a touch screen, etc. Barcodes, audio, etc. And there's some things that you can grab, like the username or the start and end time, etc., of when people did that. And you can see some example. This isn't all of them, but you see some examples of appearances and how they might look in the app. Multi-line, spinner with the little up-down buttons, calculate a number here, a slider range, a distress slider range, because it has green to red. How much pain are you in? You know, if you've ever been in the hospital or been a doctor where they ask you that, 0 to 10, that kind of thing. And images can capture signatures, like you're seeing here with a thumb, or with a touch screen, or they can capture, this isn't working, I don't know why, but they can capture, you can ask them to mark up an image as well. There we go. So you can see this is a static image that you always go out and do pole inspections or whatever that is, transmission wires, and people can mark up on that. So that's kind of a cool thing as well, right? And that would be saved as an image with the record. You can calculate things. Those calculations and expressions can be used to constrain what's in a field. You have to put a number between 1 and 26 or whatever. They can tell you when to hide or show a field in the survey. So you can do if X is greater than 5, show this or not. And you can calculate things as well. Here's some examples of those expressions. There's a lot more to it, but you can see that it's not quite the same as Excel, but it's very similar, Excel. And this is how we reference other questions. Like I could take the value you put in for pipe length feet by using this dollar curly bracket thing and multiply it to get into meters. More examples of calculations. Take adding 2 fields together, multiplying, getting today's date. Sort of like a bunch of functions that are in Excel, though slightly different. There's a good list in the help for those. Choice list, I mentioned you can have a choice list. And the way you do this is you say the type is either select one or select multiple, and then you give a list name. So here you see select one, yes, no. That means my list name is yes, no, and we'll see that in a minute. Or select multiple toppings, that'd be like the pizza toppings thing, where you can select as many as you want. And that's controlled through this appearances. Well, the look of how it looks, as you see on the right, is based on the appearance, but well, actually we'll see in a minute. But this is the tab for down the bottom for lists. This is my survey. Select one, sky color. Select one, yes, no. There shouldn't be a underbar there. That's a typo. Underscore in between 1 and sky color. And then, but that sky color and yes, no are lists. And if we go to the tab for choices, we see the list, we see the value that's stored in the database, and we see the value presented to the user. Yes, no, similarly. Yes, no in the database, yes, no shown on the screen. And here's appearances of different types of appearances of lists. You can have radio buttons that are horizontal or vertical. You can have pull downs, autocomplete, all kinds of choices for that. There's a ton more things that I could get into here, but I think it'd be better to show you by example than to just show you slides. So I want to bring up the Survey123 Connect and get into some examples. But the last thing I'll say is that once you build it and you publish it, some of these, not everything that we just talked about can be displayed in a web-based browser, but all of it can be displayed in the Field app, which again is across platform and available for download and running on a device. Okay, so let's jump out. This is Survey123 Connect. Let me do that and let me close that. Okay, if I make this giant, it doesn't really look that good, so I'm not going to do that. But let's go to the basic form, and I'm going to open its Excel spreadsheet. And if we look at it, very simple. First, you can see I defined a group. I don't have to do this, but that just makes it collapsible. Do you see that this little collapsible thing? So if you want to have groups, you can certainly do that using this begin group, end group. And then you see I've got a couple text fields, a date field, an image field, which is for a photo. And by the way, this date is getting a calculation of today. That's it could be that actually might be better in the default in case you want to change it. So I'm just going to move that over to default. Clear that out. And then I've got a geopoint. That's a map. You don't actually have to have a map in your survey, but if you want one, you can get points, lines, and polys. All right, so let me save that. And let me pop to here. And it's reloading this. Name, I can type whatever I want, description, whatever I want, and then date, I get a little date picker that I can put on a photo. I don't know what, you're gonna get a picture of me, so I'm just gonna, I can pick from my device or I can go to the camera. I don't know which camera it's gonna use, that one, hello. Here I am, and I can take that photo and that will be stored with it. And you can save multiple photos if you want, you don't have to just save one. Very simple example of this. And if we go back here, I don't know that we're using this choice list here. I don't know, we're not, but oh, we are, integer rating. See this one, that's an integer, but if we made that select one, and it was it rank? I can't remember, rank, rating, not rank, sorry. Rating, and we save this. Right, now I didn't change its look. Could be horizontal, could be compact, etc. And there's a map. That's where I am at the office today. And you can move your point around if you want. Like, no, not there. I'm here. Boom. And this is just a viewer, so I can't actually submit this. But basically, to submit it, I would publish it, and then it would be available in ArcGIS Online for someone to connect to with their Field app and download it to their Field app to use in the field. And it supports offline. You can see, I don't have really time to go over this, but I can change its name and its picture. I can set some options about whether you're allowed to edit existing records, how big images are allowed to be. I don't really need 15 megapixel images of hydrants, for instance. What map I want to use as a base map, and some other things, link contents and JavaScript, which we'll see in a few minutes. And here's the schema. This is what it's going to create. You got these fields: name, description, date, photo, rating, location, right? And it tells you about those. All right, let's look at some more interesting examples. Let's look at this example. One of the things that this app lets you do is include image maps. So these are SVG files that you map out choices on the image. And so let's show you some examples. So I want someone to pick a risk matrix. I've got an SVG image that is this grid, and I've defined these little boxes. And when I pick one, you can see I can only pick one, and it will pick that for me. So I'm doing a body part. This is a multiple, select multiple. Where are the injuries? They're all over the body, whatever. What kind of lawn do you have? What's the soil texture? Just some examples here. What state are you in? Or what states are you visiting? Whatever, etc., etc., etc. I'm doing a a car damage report, right? And these will be submitted as part of my survey. So that's a pretty cool thing. And if we look at the form for that, these are all notes, so that's not very interesting. But here's where like a soil thing is. You say it's of type image map, right? That's the important piece there, the appearance. And somewhere over here, way over here, it's going to have, there it is, the name of the image. And that gets saved with your survey and gets downloaded to whoever downloads your survey. So that's a pretty cool one. I won't save my changes. Let's go back. I want to show you some other ones. This is a good one. This is a grid. You can actually design the form such that it's not linearly down, like every question is below it. Here we've built a grid, and you can see that 3 questions are on this row, spaced differently than the 3 questions on the next row, spaced differently than the questions on the 3rd row. And the other thing I want to show you is choice lists. This is sort of a cascading choice list. Like I'm going to pick a make of car, and I'll pick Toyota. And now I only see models that are Toyotas. But if I pick close Subaru, now I see Subaru models, right? And what colors they have, et cetera, and what type they have. And that's all controlled. If you look at this choice list, you see the model name, you see the list of makes, you see the list of models, and it's controlled with this extra filter here in the list. So that's kind of a cool thing. As well as, while we're here, let's just look. We've basically said this is a grid, and we design this by saying this first group here has a width of 8, and that's just a virtual width, like 8 units across, 8 whatevers. And the first question takes up 3, then 2, then 3, then those add up to 8. So that's row 1. And then you see the next one, 3, 3, 2, that adds up to 8. And then 5 and 3, that up to 8. So you can see how it will wrap these for us based on that grid definition. So that's a pretty cool thing here. And you can see there's lots of ways you can use that grid. Okay, let's go back. Here's a barcode example. So you are inspecting poles, and the poles have a sticker on them, and you don't want to have to type in anything. So let's go to barcode, and let's see if I can get this thing. Okay, so this is a water bottle. It picked up the barcode from that water bottle, right? Using the camera. So that's pretty cool. Can't do that in a web app, right? Here's a media example, which includes sounds. I don't know that you'll be able to hear this, but we'll give it a shot. So I say, oh, what bird did you see? And I said, well, I saw a woodpecker. What does a woodpecker sound like? Can you hear that? I don't know if you heard that. Right? So that's pretty cool. There's your eagle. Anyway, you get the idea. And if you can include those little MP3s or whatever, sound clips, and they go in and get downloaded with the, I'll show you real quick if that works. I'm on Windows. There we go. In the media folder, you got the pictures and you've got the MP3s to go with them, right? Okay, what else? This is a really good one to show, and I think this is probably the last one I'll show before we go to questions, is this dynamic list. This is relatively new. Typically, you'd either put your list, like car name or car make, in the spreadsheet, or you could put it in a CSV file that lives with the project in the file folder that you just saw me go to. But you can also now access do a query from, say, a feature service in, say, ArcGIS Online or Enterprise, and have it update that list dynamically from that feature service or from a CSV that's hosted in, say, ArcGIS Online. And if you update that CSV, it will re-download it for you. So how does that work? Let me just show you. So for instance, if I go here, this list of states is coming not from me having typed in, let's bring up the form, not from me having typed in these 50 names, but from, is this the right one? Yep, dynamic lists, right? If you look at choices, I don't have states in this. Well, I do have states, but it just has a name there. But if you look, it's kind of hard to read. I got to find it here. Look up here, you can see the URL to the online service with layer 0 being the states. That's pretty cool. That's really amazing that you can do that now and have it change dynamically every time someone uses a survey. If there's a new value, it will show up. And not only that, here you can see that this county, which comes from a different layer, is using this Alabama thing to query counties in Alabama or Alaska or whatever. You could also do things like create a polygon or buffer a set of points. So for instance, I want to search using a polygon, and I'll just draw something here. Try to draw something here. And submit that. And now it's going to find, probably don't have anything. There are no schools in that polygon, but it uses the polygon I drew to do a query against a layer. So that's pretty cool. And the other thing, I didn't set up an example for it, but there's a JavaScript. You can call JavaScript functions. You can write JavaScript that will do something, whether it's overlay with another layer or do something else, and use that JavaScript in your survey. And I'll just show you, this is when you create a new survey, you give it a name, and you can use templates that we give you, or you can use samples. All the things I showed are samples. So for instance, if there's the barcode sample, here's the media sample, you can always look at these. You can look at ones from your community because you're logged in or people have shared these publicly, things in your organization. And you can also point to a feature service that you have access to. It will look at all the fields and we'll just create a very basic survey for you, and then you can work from that. And that's for something that already exists. Otherwise, for the new surveys, when you publish them, it creates a new feature layer in ArcGIS Online or Enterprise View, but you can point to an existing one and create a survey around that. And if someone gives you an Excel file with the XLS form in it, you can load that as well. So JavaScript, there's also a JavaScript example. We'll just create that real quick. Anyway, I know that, I didn't get a chance to really go into details about this, but I really wanted to show you what's possible. And I hope you got a sense that there's a lot possible with Survey 123 Connect, more so than the web version, right? So you can see here's a vehicle VIN number. This actually goes out to a third-party website, an API, takes this VIN and breaks it out and tells you this is the JSON that came back from the API, all about it. And then you could do something with this JSON, right? You could analyze it and split it up, and you can see it's done it for us here. It figured out all that stuff just from the JSON and going out to the web using JavaScript. Or the weather. Where do you want the weather for? Middleton, that's where I am. Here's the weather. So very cool, a lot of power in that. All right, I'm gonna stop and we'll take any questions for 2 minutes.
I don't see any questions so far. Okay. I do have a question though, and I did not know about that autocomplete functionality that you showed. So that is different from the JavaScript, right? Going off to the feature service and auto-completing it. Oh,
this dynamic choice list, that one?
Yep.
Yeah, so this can just query, if you look at we can look at the, it's not JavaScript, correct? Okay. You can just give the URL. There's a syntax that's pretty well established here, but you see it's an of type autocomplete, but it's a search, and here is the URL to it. And if we look at the county one, you can see it a little bit different where you say, okay, there's the URL to counties. And I'm going to pass in the state name, the field, and the criteria. So that is filtering for us within the syntax of this autocomplete search tool.
That is very cool.
Very cool. Yep.
I think we are at about 3 o'clock.
Right. All right. That's great. So thank you all for coming to this session. If you have any questions moving forward, put them in the Whova Q&A for the session or in the community for these sessions, and we'll try to get them answered. And we have a 3:30 talk, set of talks. So we'll see you back here in half an hour. And I'm going to stop the recording.